Hey, David Packman back with you for Free Speech TV at the National Conference for Media Reform in Boston. Here with Gigi Sohn, founder of Public Knowledge. Great to meet you and to be here with you.
It's great to be here.
Tell me about the uphill battle that you certainly must have faced in creating this group. Now 15 people, 15 people strong, I should add. What was it like? Tell me, give me the elevator pitch story of it, because I'm sure it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, we're 16 now, so
Okay.
so we're practically an army. So Public Knowledge started in 2001. I had left the Ford Foundation, where I started the Media and Technology Policy Portfolio, which is now our biggest funder. But we were just me, and then I hired an assistant, and we had a budget of $200,000 a year. And I basically had to build the organization from scratch. I did have some experience, because I had been at the Ford Foundation, and I had worked for other nonprofits in the field, and I just raised money and was the chief expert, policy expert at the same time. So I was really doing two big jobs at once. And about 4 or 5 years ago, the Ford Foundation started to invest very, very heavily in this area. And that and my ability to raise money from individuals and others really sort of led to us exploding. And I think about 5 years ago, there were 6 of us, and now there's 16 of us. So it's been a great growth.
Tell me a little bit about, I'm curious, having worked with and been in touch with everybody from individuals running for public office to medium-sized nonprofits. When you talk to individuals about trying to raise money and the conversations you have, what is the biggest objection that you find from people? Is it that they don't have the money to give you, which is very, with a bad economy can be the case? Is it that it's hard to really translate that a small organization can make changes? Is it something altogether different?
Well, it's a lot of things. Part of it is, look, our opponents and everything we do are the largest multi-billion-dollar multinational companies. So in our telecommunications work, we're up against AT&T and Verizon and Comcast and Time Warner Cable. In our copyright work, we're up against the Hollywood studios and the recording industry. So yeah, there's a part of that David and Goliath thing that people are like, well, if I contribute to you, can you really make a difference?
Will my money really make a difference, right? I mean, that's the question.
That's number one. Number two is, look, at a base level, people understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to make our media and communication system democratic so you can get differing viewpoints on all kinds of important issues affecting our society. And people get that. But once you get below that layer and they say, well, what is it that you do to make the media more democratic? It gets very legalistic and very wonky and very technical. And at that point, sometimes people tune out. They're like, oh, this is too difficult for me, and they walk away at that point.
Which is interesting because for so long we have seen, not to make everything political, but we have seen very successfully some on the right turn nuance and complexity into something that's objectively bad, right? If you can't explain it simply, and we saw that with John Kerry explaining his Iraq war vote in 2004, we've seen it a number of different times. How do you get past that? I mean, how can you explain to people that sometimes the simplest explanation is just not enough, and it makes sense to listen to the complexity of these issues to really understand them? I mean, is that a challenge?
It's always a challenge. Look, network neutrality is another issue where the right turned something that frankly was pro-competition and pro-free speech, and they turned it into the government takeover of the internet. And unfortunately, sometimes the issues we work on are not subject to such easy messaging. I mean, we haven't done that as well as we can. And credit goes to the Ford Foundation and others. They're giving us that kind of media training and messaging training so we can turn our issues into something simple that the American people will care about. But it's totally a challenge.
We know a lot about net neutrality. We know about what's going on with consolidation of media ownership. Something that recently I've been talking about on my program is that a lot of religious right groups and morals groups are now starting to criticize the president because he's not doing enough about broadcast indecency and swear words on TV, to which I say, that's great. That's the last thing I would want time to be wasted on, in my opinion. Do you take a position on that? Do you think that that's a good investment of time for an administration? Are there more important things to focus on?
It's so ironic, right? The right is no regulation, except when it comes to wardrobe malfunction and dirty words. Right. I mean, Public Knowledge works more sort of in the new media space, more on internet issues, not so much on broadcast indecency. I worked for an organization called the Media Access Project for 10 years, and we did work on this a lot. And our position was, look, this is a freedom of expression issue. the government can't really tell what's indecent and what isn't, and they should largely leave it alone. It should be out of the business of regulating content. I still believe that today, even though public knowledge doesn't really actively work on that issue.
What do you see in the next couple of years, other than the couple of issues we've mentioned here, as something that either is not being talked about enough, that will make a significant impact, or something that is being talked about but just not enough? What other issue is in the story here on media that we're not hearing enough about?
Well, obviously competition, particularly in the wireless industry, the announced merger of AT&T and T-Mobile, I think in a lot of ways is the tip of the iceberg and is really going to demonstrate whether antitrust law means anything anymore, whether the public interest in having, a diversity of viewpoints, diversity of carriers, whether it's going to mean anything. So that to me is really World War III, and that's going to be argued about for probably the next 2 years. So I think that's number one. Number two is, look, the copyright issues are also very complicated, but we are seeing increasing attempts by the largest Hollywood studios and recording industries to essentially disable the internet in order to protect their copyright. A huge study just came out. It was called Media Piracy in the Age of Globalization, a 440-page study. And it showed that if the big content companies would simply make their content available when it comes out, when people want it, where they want it, for a fair price, piracy would go down. But that conversation never happens because piracy is theft and it's bad, and we need to basically make internet service providers and Google and Yahoo police the internet. That is a growing issue, and it's been frustrating to not be able to get a massive amount of people saying, no, we don't want to break the internet in order to protect Universal Studios or Fox or some other huge corporation.
It almost sounds to me a little bit like the drug debate and the narrative of, if you make something legal or if you regulate it in a way where people still have access, it takes away this idea that it's something forbidden. Is that not similar to what's going on here, where when you make it so difficult to access some of this content, or expensive or in some way prohibitive, people are going to more actively try to circumvent what's legal, are they not?
Yeah, look, I have a fundamental difference of opinion with these large corporations. I believe that if you make content available easily at a fair price, people will buy it, that people are actually fundamentally honest, and that the internet is fundamentally a good place to distribute your works cheaply and easily. I mean, you get rid of all the packaging, all the distribution costs. It should be a boon, like the VCR was a boon. The big content companies think the exact opposite. They think the internet is a horrible place where there's thieves and pirates, and if you think that way, we're just never going to see eye to eye. There's another place where this is consonant with the drug war. The big content companies believe that if you just punish people more and more and more, you throw them in jail, you go after the 11-year-old honor student and put her parents in poverty over a bunch of stolen songs, that's somehow going to deter people. Or if you educated them by saying you could be thrown in jail and you could be fined, that's going to deter people. It's just not. People are going to continue to do it. So why not create a legitimate marketplace instead of trying to punish people for going to the illegitimate marketplace?
Real quick, what's your sense of when we talk about, the next 5 years and the potential that we see with the internet, but also the potential for the risks in terms of how bad the situation could get? What's a worst case scenario here if large corporations get their way completely unfettered?
The worst case scenario is we have a duopoly for wireless broadband internet access, maybe even a monopoly. Who knows? Again, what are the bounds of antitrust law? That the network neutrality rules that the FCC have adopted really don't go far enough. Remember, they don't touch wireless all that much, and wireless is where people are going to. So you have this sort of closed wireless ecosystem. It's barely an ecosystem where you've got one or two huge providers charging whatever they want, limiting the kind of text messages and data access, and putting on huge broadband caps. So that's like my nightmare scenario in telecom. And then you've got, on top of that, you've got Hollywood having, Comcast and Google and Verizon essentially policing their networks for copyright infringement and throwing people off their internet access when they violate copyright, based on allegations that they violate copyright 3 or 4 times.
It's a scary scenario.
Very scary.
Gigi Sohn, founder of Public Knowledge. Great to meet you, and so glad to talk to you.
Same here.
Back after this on Free Speech TV.